My name is Nicholas Fisher, and I am 68 years old. 6 weeks ago, I sat in the front row of a theater in Columbus, Ohio, opened my son's brand new biography, and read on page 3 that his father had died when he was 6. I am his father. I was holding the book. My knee was still in a brace. 25 years ago, I mortgaged the only house I ever owned to keep my son's first company alive. Before that, I drove a truck at night and fixed roofs during the day so he could attend the school I never could. 43 tuition payments, all in my handwriting. My family was in that book. 2 lines, chapter 7. It called me a neighbor. Before we go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read them. Now let me take you back to March of 2026, 6 weeks before that book existed, to the morning I fell off a roof. March 14th. I was on Betty Nowak's roof on Wexley Street, tearing off 40-year shingles that had gone soft as cardboard. $1,900 friend price. She'd made coffee and set it on the porch rail where I could see it. My phone went off at 10 after 9. It wasn't Grant. It was a young woman from my son's office, and she talked the way people talk when they have a list. The book launch was April 12th, the Orpheum, downtown Columbus. I'd be seated in the front row. "That's kind of him," I said. "We'll also send you a family participation agreement," she said. "Everyone signs one. It's completely standard." I said, "All right." I said, "Thank you." I put the phone in my chest pocket and turned around, and the foot of my ladder walked 6 inches on a wet tarp, and I went 11 feet into Betty's yard. I want to be honest with you. I didn't fall well.
4 years on roofs teaches you how to fall, and I forgot all of it in about a second and a half. Millbrook Community Hospital. Torn meniscus, left knee. Brace crutches, 6 weeks. $4,140 after insurance. And I sat in that plastic chair and read the number twice because that year my son was worth $2.4 billion. I didn't call him. I'm not saying that to be pitiful. It never entered my head. He was busy, and I'd been getting myself home from hospital since 1972. He didn't call me either. I signed the media release that week. It came in a stack with a return envelope 2 paragraphs long, and I signed it. I did not sign the other one. 6 weeks later, that mattered more than the roof ever did. I bought 1140 Kestrel Road in 1983, 1,100 square feet, aluminum siding, a garage that leans about 2 degrees off true, and has leaned that way since Reagan. I paid it off in 1997. I mortgaged it again in 2002. I paid it off the second time in 2019 at 61 years old, and I didn't tell anybody, and nobody asked. Carol's picture is still on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet from a plumbing supply company that closed in 2009. She died in June of 2016. Ovarian cancer, 14 months, all of it at home because that's what she wanted. I still make 2 cups of coffee every morning. I pour one out. I know how that sounds. I've stopped explaining it. The invitation came the Thursday after I fell. Heavy cream, cardstock, my name raised up so you could feel it with your thumb. Nicholas Fisher. They spelled it with a C. I sat there running my thumb over the letters like a man reading Braille, and I thought, well, somebody typed that off a list. Betty Nowak came by that afternoon with a casserole she pretended was extra. She looked at the invitation on the table and didn't touch it.
"Your boy still call Nick?" "He's busy," I said. "Company's big now." She nodded the way people nod in a town of 4,000 when they've decided not to say the next thing. On the counter by the window sits Carol's sewing tin, blue with a lighthouse on the lid, dented on one corner. It's been sitting there since the week she died, and I have never once opened it. 10 years. I want you to remember that tin. I didn't open it until May. In 1972, I got into St. Aldrich Preparatory Academy. You have to know what that meant in Millbrook. Nobody's father went there. It's a stone building with a bell tower on the good side of the county, and I took a test in a gymnasium with 140 other boys, and I came out 4th. 3 weeks later, my father fell off the roof of Trinity Lutheran Church. He lived 9 days. I was 14. I finished 9th grade and went to work, and I have been a roofer since October of 1972. I still carry the acceptance letter in my wallet. 54 years. It's worn through on both folds, and you can't read the date anymore. In 1993, my son got into the same school. I want to tell you about the admissions interview because I've turned it over more times than I'd like to admit. I came straight off a job.
I had tar on my forearms and on the cuff of my shirt, and I scrubbed at a gas station sink on Route 33, and it did not come off, because it doesn't. The admissions man was pleasant. He asked Grant about math. He asked Carol about her nursing. Then he turned to me. "And what line of work are you in, Mr. Fisher?" Grant answered before I opened my mouth. "He's in construction." That was all. 3 words. The man wrote something down and moved on, and we got in the car, and Carol said the seats in the waiting room felt fancy, and Grant talked the whole way home about the science wing. I told myself he was nervous. He was 14.
Everybody's ashamed of something at 14. That was the first time my son edited me in front of a stranger. I didn't notice. I'd noticed the 11th time in a theater 33 years later. Here is what 4 years looked like. 9 at night, I clocked in at Hollis Freight on the south end of Columbus. Columbus to Pittsburgh, 185 miles back before dawn. I slept 2 hours in the cab at the truck stop on Route 33, the one with the yellow sign, and my alarm was a wind-up clock because my phone died in the cold. 6:30 in the morning, I was on somebody's roof. Tuition was $9,400 a year. St. Aldrich billed by the term, and I paid it 43 times over 4 years, and every one of those payments is in my notebook, in my own handwriting, because I have kept a book of every job since 1981. $37,600 total. Carol picked up nights at Millbrook Care Center. We saw each other Sunday afternoons. There was one other thing. Freshman year, Grant asked me very carefully if I could park 2 blocks down from the school gate. He said the drop-off lane wasn't built for a truck. He was right about that. It wasn't. I parked on Fenner Street for 4 years. I could see the bell tower from there. I used to sit and look at it with the engine off. I'm not telling you that so you'll feel sorry for me. I'd have parked in the next county. That was the deal I made with myself in 1972, and I never regretted a mile of it. Carol said, "He'll understand it when he's older, Nicky." She was right. He understood it perfectly. There was one payment I never made in those 4 years. One. I didn't find out about it for 29 years, and when I did, I had to sit down on the floor of a public building in Columbus. November of 2002. Grant was 23. He and Owen Delaney had a company called Fisher Root Systems in a garage off Vine Street, dispatch software for freight outfits too small for the big systems. They had 11 days of payroll left and 2 employees with families. He didn't ask me. I want that on the record. He came to the house on a Tuesday and sat at the kitchen table and told Carol the truth, and I heard it through the wall. We went to Millbrook Community Credit Union on the 14th. The loan officer was a woman named Ruth Callahan, 42, then gray already, reading glasses on a chain. She had the appraisal, and she had my payment history going back 19 years. "Nick, this house is clear," she said. "You understand what you're doing?" I said I did. $95,000 against a house I had finished paying for 5 years earlier. Grant signed 2 things at that table: a promissory note for the full amount, and an assignment of 9% of the membership interest in Fisher Root Systems LLC, which at that moment was worth exactly nothing, and everybody in the room knew it. I said, "I don't need the paper, son." He said, "I do." Ruth notarized both, stamped them, and wrote them into a blue logbook with a ribbon in it. She turned the book around so I could see my own name in her handwriting. Grant said it out loud in front of her. "I'm getting your house back, Dad, on paper, not as a favor." I put the originals in a manila envelope, and I put the envelope in the crawl space under the back bedroom in a coffee can, because that's where my father kept things. In 2009, the company reorganized into Meridian Root Group. Lawyers cleaned everything up. Nobody ever called me to sign anything. I didn't think about that for 17 years. March 21st. Dinner at Grant's house in Bexley. First time I'd been invited in 14 months. There's a table there that seats 12, and a woman who comes in to serve. My granddaughter Elle is 15. She has Carol's chin. She was on the far side of the table with her phone face down beside her plate, which I took as good manners. She passed me the potatoes. "Here you go, Mr. Fisher." I laughed. I actually laughed because I thought it was a joke, and I waited for the rest of it. She looked back at me politely and passed the butter. Vivian said from the head of the table, "Elle, honey, you remember Nick. He was Dad's neighbor back in Millbrook." Elle said, "Oh." Then she frowned a little. "How come you have the same last name?" Vivian didn't miss a beat. "Fisher was your grandmother's maiden name, sweetheart."
Carol's maiden name was Boyd. Boyd. I sat there with a serving spoon in my hand. Grant looked at his plate. He cut something that didn't need cutting. I did the arithmetic in the truck on the way home at 45 miles an hour, on Route 33, with my knee brace propped against the door. L is 15. 15 years is not a slip. 15 years is not a child forgetting. Somebody had been telling her that story her whole life. And here's the part that kept me up. Vivian didn't check with anybody before she said it. She didn't glance at Grant. She said it the way you say your own phone number. That meant it wasn't a lie she was inventing at the table. It was a lie she was maintaining. 2 days later, a woman called me from a number in Toledo. Diane Kessler. 52, a voice like a schoolteacher who's had enough. She said she wrote the book. Not the name on the cover, she wrote it. I remembered her. She'd sat in my kitchen for 3 days in August of 2024 with a legal pad and a cup she never drank out of. 14 hours of questions. What time did I clock in? What did the cab smell like? Did I ever fall asleep at a light?
I'd assumed it was for an appendix, something small in the back. We met at the wagon wheel on Route 33. She ordered eggs and didn't touch them. I wrote 3 chapters about you, she said. 2, 4, and 9. That's more than I expected. In January of 2025, I got an email from the brand team, she said. Cut all 3. I turned my coffee cup around on the table. Cut them for what went in that space. She looked out the window for a long time. There was a truck idling out there, and you could feel it in the floor. Mr. Fisher, I signed things. I'm not allowed to say it out loud. Then say something else. She picked up her purse. She put $12 down on a $9 breakfast and stood up, and she stopped with her hand on the back of the chair. Read page 3, she said. Read it yourself before somebody reads it to you. Then she left, and I sat in that booth until the waitress asked if I was all right. I want you to understand something. At that moment, I still thought this was a misunderstanding. It took 4 days to get my son on the phone. I called the number I have. It went to a service. A man called back and took a message. A woman called back and scheduled something. On the 4th day, Grant called me from a car and I could hear a turn signal. Dad, I've got about 7 minutes. What does the book say about me? There was a pause with road noise in it. Dad, it's a narrative. It's not a deposition. That's not an answer. You have no idea what this year has cost me, he said. The board, the raise, Viv's foundation gala, the documentary people. I am running on about 4 hours a night. I said I ran on 2 for 4 years. What does it say about me? And here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that told me everything. He didn't ask me why I was asking. A man who's got nothing in a book asks, what do you mean? He asks, who told you that? My son asked me neither one. He went straight to being tired. I'm going into a garage, he said. I'm going to lose you. Grant. Love you, Dad. Click. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and the second cup of coffee going cold on the counter where it goes cold every morning. Then I got a flashlight out of the drawer and I went out to the back bedroom and I got down on my bad knee in front of the crawlspace hatch. It took me 11 minutes to get through that hatch with a torn meniscus, and I am not going to describe the noise I made. The coffee can was where I left it, up on the sill plate under the back bedroom, furred over with dust and a paper wasp nest from some summer. The manila envelope was inside. Water had gotten at one corner years ago and dried again the way it does. I brought it up to the kitchen table and laid it out under the light. The promissory note. November 14th, 2002, $95,000. His signature, which back then still had the loop he stopped doing in his 30s. The assignment of 9% membership interest. Same date, same signature. Ruth Callahan's notary stamp pressed hard enough to raise the paper. My notebook from that decade, brown leather, the spine gone. 43 lines. St. Aldrich term, payment, dollar figure, date. My handwriting, which slants left because a man in 1975 told me it was wrong, and I've been contrary ever since. I sat there a long time. I'm a roofer. We keep everything. Every change order, every scrap of a note somebody wrote on the back of a receipt,
because sooner or later a man tells you he never asked for the ridge vent. You never know what you'll have to prove. Then I noticed what wasn't there.
There should have been a cream-colored sheet in that envelope folded in four. I could see it in my head. Grant handed it to me in the spring of 1997 in this same kitchen, and I remembered the color of it, and it was not in the envelope, and it was not in the can. I couldn't tell you then what it was. That took me another 3 weeks. Owen Delaney teaches network administration at Columbus State now. I found him in a basement lab with 12 dead computers on a bench. He knew me before I got my name out. "Nick," he said. "God, sit down." He was 24 in that garage. He's 48 now, and he's got a bad shoulder and 2 kids in college, and he has never once been mentioned in a Meridian press release. I asked him what he knew about the book. He said nothing. Then he said, "But I know what's in the deck." He pulled up an investor presentation on the bench computer, a copy he'd kept from 2019 when a headhunter sent it to him by accident, which he said was the funniest day of his life. Page 4. Company history. Founded 2001 by Grant Fisher. No outside capital until Series A 2011. I read it twice. "Owen," I said, "I'm outside capital." 95 grand, he said, in the worst month we ever had, and I'm a guy who doesn't exist. Then he told me about 2009, the reorganization. Fisher Route Systems LLC rolled up into a Delaware corporation. Lawyers in Chicago cleaning what they called a messy cap table. "Did they send you anything to sign?" he asked. "No." "Nick," he turned around in his chair, "they should have sent you a stack an inch thick." Nobody had. Not a letter, not a call, not a release. My 9% had never been bought out, never been converted, never been canceled. It was just sitting there in a filing cabinet in Delaware like a nail somebody forgot to pull. I stood up to go, and Owen said one more thing. "Nick, did you ever actually read a scholarship file?" March 30th, the Orpheum, 10 in the morning. They call it a run a show. That theater is a 1928 vaudeville house. They spent $9 million putting back together. 420 seats, painted ceiling, and the acoustics are so good you can hear a program close in the 4th row. Vivian walked me through it herself. She's 44, and she is extremely good at her job, and I want to be fair to her about that. "You're at A7, she said. "When Grant mentions Millbrook, there'll be a light cue. You just wave. It's lovely, it always lands. And when I'm introduced, you won't be formally. The program's very tight." She had a folder under her arm. She gave me 4 stapled pages. "Standard family confidentiality," she said. "Everyone signs. Me, Grant's assistant, the caterer." "Why does a book party need confidentiality?" "Because reporters come," she said, "and they ask filthy questions, and this family has earned a nice night." I folded it and put it in my shirt pocket. I didn't sign it. She watched me not sign it, and she smiled and said we'd sort it out later. On the way out, I passed the seating board on an easel by the door. Grid of little printed rectangles, A7 had a label on it. It didn't say Nicholas Fisher, it said community guest. I stood there with my crutch and my folder, and a woman with a headset walked around me twice. Then I drove home and put a roof on a garage in Kirkersville for $800, and I thought about that board the entire time, and I hit my thumb once, which I have not done since 1988. 2 days later, I was invited to the 31st floor. Marshall Pike is 61. Chairman of Meridian's board, founder of Pike Harbor Capital. Office with a view of the river and a coffee machine that cost more than my truck. He called me sir. He called me sir, the way men call a contractor sir, when the contractor is standing in their kitchen. "Sir, I want to be straightforward with you," he said. "There's a great deal of goodwill in this company toward you." "That's nice to hear." He slid a folder across. Inside was a single page and a check made out to me for $250,000. "A gift in recognition," he said. "No conditions to speak of." There's a page under it. "A confidentiality agreement and one small logistical item," he smiled. "We'd ask that you not attend on the 12th. The room went very quiet. That's the thing about high floors. There's no sound at all. $250,000 is more than I earned in my best 6 years put together.
I want you to hold that in your hand for a second, because I did. No, I said. He didn't get angry. That's the part I'd tell you to watch for. Your liability carrier is Keystone Mutual, isn't it? He said, pleasant as weather. Our fund holds a majority position in Keystone. I only mention it so you understand how small the world is. I stood up. My knee did not cooperate, and it took me a moment, and he watched me do it. Mr. Pike, I said, I've been paid for every roof I ever put on. I've never once been paid to leave one off. The elevator needed a badge, so I took the stairs. 31 flights, torn meniscus, 1 crutch, 26 minutes. I want you to know I made it. I want to stop here for a second because this is the part I still think about at night. $250,000, and all I had to do was not walk into a room. If you've ever been offered something to make yourself smaller, a raise with a condition on it, a favor, a seat at the table, if you'd just be quiet, tell me in the comments what the price was and whether you took it. I'd like to know I wasn't the only man doing that math.
All right, back to it. Because 2 weeks later I drove to a filing cabinet in Columbus, and everything I've told you so far turned out to be the small half of the story. Elle found me at the lumber yard. She rode 3 miles on a bicycle to the Millbrook Builder Supply on a Saturday in a school jacket, and she waited by the shingle racks while I loaded 40 squares of architectural gray. Mr. Fisher, I have a school thing. She had a worksheet. Interview an older person in your community. 6 questions and a line for their signature at the bottom. There's people at church, I said. You're the only person I know who works with their hands. So I sat on a pallet of underlayment and answered her questions. What was your first job? What's changed the most? What do you wish people understood about what you do? I told her the truth on every one. I didn't say one word about her father. That was the hardest half hour of the whole spring, and I want to be honest about why. It would have been so easy. She was right there. She'd have believed me because kids believe the person who's talking. Then question 6. Do you have any kids? I looked at the shingles for a while. I have 1 son, I said. She wrote it down. She didn't ask his name and I didn't give it. Some things a girl should hear from her father, not from a man in a lumber yard with a hand truck. She signed the sheet and got on her bike and said, "Thanks, Mr. Fisher," and I stood there in the gravel for a while after she was gone. Then I drove to Columbus because Owen's question had been sitting in me for 11 days like a stone in a boot. The Whitcomb Legacy Foundation has an office on Broad Street with a woman at a desk who was very kind to me. They're a non-profit. Award records are open to the public. She brought me a box from 1997 and put it on a table and gave me a pair of cotton gloves and left me alone with it. Application grant, Nicholas Fisher. Dated February 4th, 1997. He was 17. Eligibility top of the form in bold for students who have lost a parent. Then a box. Name of deceased parent, Nicholas R. Fisher. Year of death, 1985. I sat in a wooden chair in a public building in Columbus, Ohio, at 68 years old and read my own name in a box that said deceased. The essay was 500 words. It was good. He was always a good writer. It was about growing up with no one to show him how to be a man, and about a mother who worked nights, and about a chair at a kitchen table that nobody sat in. The award was $6,000 a year for 4 years, $24,000. And that's when I remembered the cream-colored sheet. Spring of 1997, my kitchen. He handed it to me across the table and said, "Merit award, Dad. It's not much." I looked at the top line. I didn't read the rest. I want to tell you exactly why, and then I'm going to move on. I read slow. I've read slow my whole life. And I was not going to stand in my own kitchen and read slowly in front of my 17-year-old son who went to St. Aldrich. So I said, "That's good, bud," and I handed it back, and I drove to Columbus that night, and I drove to Pittsburgh, and I came back at dawn, and I got on a roof. 4 more years of that, and part of what I was working for had already been paid for with my death. I drove home, and I opened Carol's sewing tin. 10 years I'd walked past it. It came open the way those lids do all at once, and it smelled like her hands. Spools, a pincushion shaped like a tomato, a thimble worn thin on one side, and underneath all of it folded once a letter in her handwriting, dated March of 2016, addressed to Grant, never sent. She knew. She'd known since 1998 when a form came to the house about renewal, and she opened the mail, because she always opened the mail. She wrote that she went to him, and he cried and promised. She wrote that she went back the next year, and the next. 19 years. Every year she asked him to fix it himself. She wrote that she never told me because in 1998 he was 18 years old, and she had read enough to know what the word for it was, and she was not going to be the one who put her son in front of that. I've read that letter more times than is good for a person. The last 2 lines I could say in my sleep. Your father still doesn't know. I am asking you one more time to be the one who tells him. Do it while he can still climb a ladder. She died 4 months after she wrote that. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher and I cried for the first time since her funeral. And I want to be clear that I was not crying about the money. I was crying because my wife carried that by herself for 18 years, and I was in the next room the whole time sleeping 2 hours at a stretch, and I never once asked her what was wrong. And my son had 19 chances. He used all 19. April 8th. Donor dinner for the First Light Foundation ballroom of the Hyatt downtown. 60 people plated chicken a string trio. I wore the suit I wore to Carol's funeral. It still fits. I've weighed the same since 1994. Vivian spoke for 11 minutes and she was very good. We fund kids who grow up the way Grant grew up, she said. Without a father. That's not a marketing line. That's the whole reason this room exists. Applause. Real applause from people who write real checks. Then she found me with her eyes and put her hand out toward my table. And we have a special guest tonight, Nick, who used to drive Grant to school back in Millbrook.
Thank you, Nick.
60 people turned around and clapped at me. A man at my table leaned over and squeezed my shoulder and said, "That's a good thing you did." A woman across from me asked if I still drove. I stood up. I did it slow because of the knee and because I wanted to get it right. I said, "I'm his father." 3 people laughed. Not cruelly. That's the part I need you to hear. They laughed the way you laugh at a nice old man who's made a sweet joke, and one of them said, "Aren't we all?" And the trio started again. And Vivian was already at the next table with her hand on somebody's back. I sat down. 60 people heard me say it, clearly, in a well-lit room, in a suit, and it changed nothing because Vivian had spent 11 minutes telling them who I was first. That's what I learned that night, and it's why the 12th went the way it went. Telling the truth politely in the wrong room at the wrong minute is the same as saying nothing at all. On her way past me, she stopped and said it very quietly without turning her head. "Please don't do that again. It reads as confusion." The courier envelope came on the 10th, event credential on a lanyard, parking pass, lot C, and a table card the kind that stands up in front of a place setting, printed on the same heavy cream stock as the invitation. Nicholas Fisher, family friend. They got the spelling right that time. I carried it into the kitchen and set it on the table next to my acceptance letter from St. Aldrich, 1972. 2 pieces of paper about 54 years apart. I didn't tear it up. I've watched a lot of men tear things up. It's never once helped. I put it in my wallet behind the letter. Then I made 3 phone calls. Owen Delaney said yes in about 4 seconds and asked if he should wear a tie. Diane Kessler said yes, and then was quiet for so long I thought the call dropped, and then she said, "Thank God." Ruth Callahan asked me one question first. "Are you going to sue him, Nick?" "No, ma'am." "You sure? Because I'm a notary. I don't volunteer for anything. If somebody asks me a direct question in public, I answer it truthfully, and that's the whole of what I do. That's all I want." "Then I'll be there," she said. "I'll bring the book." I want to be plain about what I was planning, because I've thought about it a great deal since. I was not going to take $1 away from my son. I was going to take my name back. Those aren't the same thing, and anybody who tells you they are has never had theirs taken. They fired Diane Kessler on the 11th, the day before the launch. Contract terminated early. They offered to pay out the balance of her fee, $140,000, in exchange for an expanded confidentiality agreement. She didn't sign it. She lost the money, and they pulled her name off the copyright page in a reprint order that went out the same afternoon. She drove down from Toledo and met me in the parking lot of a church on Route 33 because she said she was through with diners. She had a folder, Chapter 4, Original Draft, and a second document, 2 pages, with a signature at the bottom.
That's the source participation release, she said. Publisher requires it for any living subject who sits for interviews. Grant signed it August 2024. I read it. Halfway down in the list of interviewed subjects, Nicholas R. Fisher, father, his signature at the bottom. The one without the loop. 18 months before they printed a book that said I died in 1985, my son signed a legal document acknowledging that he had a living father who sat down and talked to a writer for 14 hours.
Why are you doing this? I asked her. You just lost $140,000. I'm not brave, Mr. Fisher. She shut the trunk. I've got a father in Toledo. He's 79. He reads everything I write with a magnifying glass and he keeps it in a drawer. She got in her car. I'm just tired, she said, of being paid to leave people out. That was the 11th. At 11:40 that night, my phone lit up on the nightstand. I ironed the funeral suit at 11 at night, which is a thing men my age do when we can't sleep. I laid 3 papers in the manila envelope in order. Note on top because it's the simplest. Assignment second. Notebook last because a notebook is the one nobody expects. Then I stood in my kitchen and said my own name out loud 3 times. My name is Nicholas Robert Fisher. I did that because I knew my voice was going to shake on the first word, and I wanted to spend the shake in my own house, instead of in front of 400 people. It shook all 3 times. At 11:40 the phone lit up. One text, the only one he sent me in 6 weeks. Tomorrow means a lot. Please just be there for me. I looked at it for a long while. Then I typed back, I'll be in the front row. I've been in the front row for 47 years. He read it. It said so under the message. He didn't answer. I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen chair until about 4 and watched the window get gray over the no-ax garage, and around 5 I made 2 cups of coffee and poured one out. I want you to understand something before we walk into that theater together, because after this it gets fast and I won't have time to say it. I did not go there to ruin my son. I went there to find out whether he would say my name if somebody asked him to. Everything that happened after depended on his answer, and I did not know what it was going to be. The Orpheum, on the night of April 12th. 420 seats, every one of them full. 3 cameras, a live stream. 2 rows of high school students bussed in from a Charter Academy Meridian sponsors. A reporter from the Columbus Dispatch in row 3 with a notebook on his knee. There was a table at the back stacked with 400 hardcovers, and the whole lobby smelled like new ink. I sat at A7 with my crutch under the seat. L was 3 seats down, at A4, in a green dress, sitting up very straight. They put a copy in every seat. Mine was on my lap. I opened the front matter first, the way you do. The dedication read, "For my mother, who did it alone." I turned to page 3. My father died when I was 6. I have exactly one memory of him, and I am not certain it is real. I closed the book. In that room you could hear it. A woman 2 seats over glanced at me. I opened it again and went to the index and looked myself up because a man does. And there I was, page 1, 18, chapter 7, 2 lines. A neighbor named Nick, a roofer who sometimes drove him to school. Then I checked the table of contents. Chapter 2, Chapter 4, Chapter 9. Diane's 3 chapters. All 3 still had numbers. All 3 had different titles now, about product design and a hiring philosophy. The paper was very good. Thick. You could feel it with your thumb. I sat there without moving for 11 minutes. The lights went down at minute 9, and I kept sitting there in the dark with the book shut on my knees. My son is a very good speaker. I've never denied it, and I won't start now. He came out in a gray suit with no tie, and he didn't use the lectern. He told them about the night his father died. Rain. The light off an ambulance on the wet street. His mother sitting on the front steps with her hands over her face, and a 6-year-old boy standing in the doorway in pajamas, not understanding why nobody would look at him. 400 people went absolutely silent. The woman 2 seats over from me put a hand on her chest. I have never owned a pair of pajamas in my life. Neither has that boy. He slept in a t-shirt, same as me. Then he said the other thing. I built this without a single dollar that wasn't mine. That's not a boast. That's just the ledger. They stood up.
All of them. 420 people on their feet, and the students in the back rows the loudest because kids that age want that story to be true so badly. Elle stood up too. She clapped with her hands up by her chin the way she must have seen somebody do. And in the middle of that sentence, in the middle of the words, "Wasn't mine, my son," looked down into the front row at seat A7. One time. Half a second. Then back up to the light. I have thought about that half second every day since. Because a man who's forgotten you doesn't check where you're sitting. He knew exactly where I was. He had known the entire time. That was when I understood this wasn't an error anybody was going to fix in the second printing. The moderator opened it up for questions. Floor microphone left aisle. It was on the program. The publisher put it there. I got up. It's 9 steps from A7 to that microphone, and I took them badly because of the knee and the sound of an uneven walk on an old wood floor carries in a room like that. People turned. Vivian saw me from the wing, and I watched her face change 1 degree. The microphone came on with a small pop. My name is Nicholas Robert Fisher. I'm 68 years old. I'm a roofer from Millbrook, Ohio. I let that sit. And I'm the man on page 3. Nobody made a sound.
The reporter in row 3 stopped writing, which I noticed. I opened the envelope. First document. Promissory note, $95,000, November 14th, 2002, secured against my house at 1140 Kestrel Road. Signed by Grant Fisher. Second document. Assignment of 9% membership interest in Fisher Route Systems, LLC. Same date, same signature. Third. My work notebook. 43 tuition payments to St. Aldrich Preparatory Academy, 1993 to 1997, in my handwriting, $37,600. The moderator, to her great credit, did her job. Sir, can anyone verify those? And in row 11 a chair came up. Ruth Callahan stood there in a navy blazer, holding a blue logbook over her head with a ribbon hanging out of it. Ruth Callahan, Regional Manager, Millbrook Community Credit Union, Ohio Notary Commission 2001-4471. Her voice does not need a microphone and never has. I notarize both of those instruments myself. This is my journal. Row and date are right here. 400 people made the sound 400 people make, and that's when Marshall Pike stood up on the far side of the room. That's when I stopped being a family problem. Owen Delaney stood up in row 7 with a stapled deck in his hand. Owen Delaney, I co-founded that company in a garage on Vine Street. He held it up. Investor presentation, page 4. Quote, founded 2001 by Grant Fisher, no outside capital until Series A 2011. The reporter was writing again, fast. I said the only thing I said all night that had lawyers in it, and I said it slow. That 9% was never bought back. Nobody ever sent me anything to sign in 2009. I don't know what that means. I'm a roofer. I looked out at the room. But I'd guess somebody in here does. Pike was already at the wing with a phone against his ear and his back to the audience. Then Vivian came out from stage left and took the microphone right out of the moderator's hand. I'm so sorry, everyone. This is a confused older gentleman, and I'm heartbroken for our family. She said it too soon. That's the thing about a room. A room can hold a lot, but a room can count. Ruth Callahan was still standing with her journal up. Owen was still holding the deck. And in row 2, Diane Kessler stood up. Diane Kessler, I ghost wrote this book. I was fired yesterday. She lifted 2 pages. Source Participation Release Publisher Standard. Signed by Grant Fisher, August 2024. It names his living father as an interviewed subject. It's his signature. Compare it to page 3. Vivian said into a live microphone in front of 400 people and a camera, "You are humiliating your own son in public." I said, "Ma'am, I'm the only one here who hasn't said anything untrue." Somewhere in the back, a student started clapping and stopped, embarrassed. Then somebody else picked it up. I put my hand up and the clapping quit, and I'm grateful for that because I did not come there to be applauded. I want to say 3 things, and then I'll sit down. I'm not suing anybody. I'm not claiming that 9% of... I'm not filing a complaint with anybody about anything. I don't want a piece of this company. I never did. I looked at the publisher's people at the side table. 1.
Fix the book. Pull it, correct it, reprint it with chapters 2, 4, and 9 the way Diane Kessler wrote them. 2. The foundation changes its name and opens up to kids going into the trades, and somebody outside the family audits it. 3. $95,000 at the rate Millbrook Community Credit Union posted on November 14, 2002, which was 6 3/8%. Not a penny over. I'll take a cashier's check in the mail.
Then I turned toward the stage. My son was standing at the edge of the light with both arms down at his sides. "Grant," I said, "say my name." 4 seconds. I counted them. 4 seconds is a very long time in a room with 400 people in it and nobody breathing. "Nicholas Fisher," he said. "And what am I to you?" He put his hand over his mouth and took it away again. "You're my father." It came out broken in the middle. The live stream had 40,000 people on it at that minute. His voice broke in front of all of them, and I'm not going to pretend I felt good about that because I didn't. He's my kid. I've felt bad about that every day since. Then down in the front row, my granddaughter stood up in her green dress. Elle turned all the way around in seat A4 past 200 adults, and she looked at me. 15 years old, and it was the first time in her life she had ever looked at her grandfather and known who he was. Somebody clipped 6 minutes and 40 seconds off the live stream and put it up before I got out of the parking garage. 11.2 million views in 72 hours. Hartwell and Doyle recalled 147,000 copies on Tuesday morning and announced a corrected edition. The documentary people at the streamer put out one sentence with the word indefinitely in it. Ohio State postponed an honorary doctorate that had been scheduled for May 9th. I found all this out from Betty Novak, who does not have a computer and hears everything anyway. I went back to work Monday. Betty's roof still leaked at the chimney flashing. That part of the world had not changed at all, which I found steadying. My phone got about 4,100 calls in 4 days. I had that number since 2004. I gave it up on Friday. And here's the thing I did not expect. Most of them weren't reporters. Somto put my number in a comment thread, and it ran, and what came through was men. 60, 70 years old, a lot of them. A man in Bakersfield who paid for a dental practice and got invited to the open house as a guest. A man in Erie whose daughter's wedding program listed her stepfather as her father and him not at all. A retired machinist in Alabama who talked for 9 minutes and never once said what happened to him, just breathed. I couldn't take them all. I want to say that plainly because some of you may have been one of them. I answered maybe 40, and then I sat down on the porch steps and I couldn't do any more. A woman from the dispatch left 11 messages. I never called her back. I'd already said everything I had in the room where it belonged, and I wasn't going to start selling it. The board met on the 17th. They postponed the funding roadshow 60 days for what the press release called a disclosure review. 2 of Pike Harbor's limited partners pulled commitments. The fund wrote its position down, and Marshall Pike kept his seat, which tells you most of what you need to know about how those rooms work. First Light Foundation went under independent audit. 11 days after the launch, Vivian Crane resigned as chief brand officer and as board chair of the foundation. Her statement used the phrase, "to focus on family." I'll leave that alone. The Whitcomb Legacy Foundation sent a demand for the $24,000. Grant paid it in 48 hours with interest, and then he did something I didn't ask for and didn't expect. He put out a statement with his own name on it that said he lied on that form at 17 and never corrected it, and that no one else knew, and that his mother had asked him to fix it for 19 years. Owen Delaney got a line on the company website, co-founder 2001. One line 17 years late. He sent me a picture of it from the basement lab. Meridian did not go under. 1,900 people went to work on Monday the same as they did on Friday. I want to be clear that I'm glad about that, and I mean it. There is a version of that night where I walk in with a lawyer and try to break the thing, and those 1,900 people find out on the news. I've been laid off twice. I know what that morning is. People kept asking if I felt vindicated. I felt 68. That's a different feeling, and it's got a lot more furniture in it. 9 days later, a black car came up Kestrel Road. April 21st. 3 of them got out. Grant, a lawyer with a briefcase, and a young man in a very good jacket who I later understood was there to manage how this looked. I went to the screen door. I did not open it. "Dad, can we come in?" "Say it from there." The lawyer started. Grant put a hand up and stopped him, which I gave him credit for. "We want to buy you a house," Grant said. "Bexley, near us. And there's this." He held up an envelope. $4 million. He said the number out loud on my front walk, with the no-ax kitchen light on across the street. "And then we close the door on this, and we're a family again." I stood behind that screen and looked at my son. "I told 400 people what I wanted," I said. "It was 95,000, and 6 3/8. That was 8 days ago. It was cheaper than this, and you were standing right there." "Dad, cashier's check, in the mail." The lawyer said something about a mutual release and a non-disparagement clause, and I let him finish because his mother probably worked hard too. Then I said the thing I'd been putting together in my head since the Hyatt. "You can come to this house as my son. You can't come to it as a company." "Dad, that's not fair. It's the only offer I've got, and it doesn't expire." I closed the door. The lawyer said my name 3 times through the screen. I stood in my own hallway with my hand still on the knob, and I did not open it. They went back down the walk. Then Grant stopped at the car and stood there in the road for about 20 minutes with his hands in his pockets. I watched him from the kitchen window through the curtain. I did not go out. Hartwell and Doyle reinstated Diane Kessler in May. Full fee plus the balance in her name went on the cover where it should have been in the first place. The corrected edition kept most of the book. I want to be honest about that because it matters to me that you hear it. My son built that company. He worked 18-hour days for 11 years. He made a piece of software that lets a 2-truck outfit in Zanesville bid against a fleet. None of that was a lie, and the corrected edition didn't touch it. But chapters 2, 4, and 9 came back. Diane sent me a proof. Chapter 4 opens with my 1994 schedule printed exactly the way it sits in my notebook. 9 p.m. Columbus, 5 a.m. Pittsburgh, 6:30 a.m. Wexley Street. She called to ask if that was all right, and I said it looked like a bill of materials, and she said that was the point. Then I gave her Carol's letter. She read it in my kitchen and put it down and didn't say anything for a while. Then she asked if she could use it. I said 1 line, the last one. So chapter 9 opens with my wife's handwriting reproduced, and underneath it in type, "Do it while he can still climb a ladder." Diane said, "Your wife wrote better than either of us, Mr. Fisher." I said I'd been telling her that for 34 years and she never believed me. That was the 29th of May. The next morning a rental car came up Kestrel Road, and this time there was 1 man in it. May 30th. No lawyer, no jacket man, no envelope. He left his phone in the car. I watched him do it. I brought out 2 cans of pop, and we sat on the steps, and he did not ask to come inside, and I did not ask him to. "I filled that form out at 2 in the morning, he said. "Kitchen table, you were on the road. I remember the pen was almost out of ink." "Why?" "Because $6,000 a year was what it cost to be somebody at that school." He turned the can around in his hands. "And there was a box, and there was a thing to write in the box, and I wrote it. It took about 9 seconds. "And after?" "The money came, and then it came again." He looked at the road. "And by the 3rd year, Dad, there was no way to say it that didn't end with me in a room with somebody from the county." "Your mother gave you 19 chances." "I know." "You had 1 every year of my life since." "I know," he said. "I don't have a better answer than that. It got easier to keep every single year, and I never noticed the day it turned into who I was." He didn't ask me to forgive him. I'll give him that. He asked one thing. "Can I come back?" I sat there for a while, with the can sweating in my hand. "Not this week," I said. He nodded. He didn't argue. He got up off my steps and he put his hand on my shoulder for about a second and a half, and then he went to the car. "Forgiveness isn't a door you kick open, son. It's a roof. It goes on 1 row at a time." The cashier's check came in an ordinary envelope in June, $95,000 plus 6 3/8% calculated to the day.
Somebody had done that arithmetic carefully, and I choose to believe it was him. I didn't keep it. It's a fund now at the County Career Center in Millbrook.
The Carol Fisher Trades Grant. 11 awards a year, roofing, electrical, welding. First class went out in August, and one of them was Betty Nowak's grandnephew, which she has not stopped talking about. I teach a safety class there Tuesday nights, 14 students, ladders, tie-offs, what a wet tarp does to a footing. I still don't like reading out loud in front of a room, so I mostly teach with my hands, and it turns out that works fine for roofing, and one of the boys told me in September I was the best teacher he'd had, which I did not know what to do with. Elle comes on Saturdays. She calls me Grandpa Nick now. She started in June without any ceremony about it, and the first time she did it I had to go get something out of the truck. She learned to run a nail gun in July. She's better than her father was. I have not told him that. Grant and Vivian separated in August. I heard it from the news, same as you. Elle asked me about it once out in the driveway, and I said her mother loves her very much, and that her father is a good deal better at building things than he is at telling the truth about them, and that both of those can be true. That's the most I'll ever say about it to that girl. She's got 2 parents. I'm not going to be a third opinion. The corrected edition came in the mail in September, no note with it, just the book in a padded envelope with a Toledo return address, so I know who sent it. I opened the front matter standing up at the kitchen counter the way I do with the mail. For my mother who did it alone, and for my father who was never a neighbor. I read it maybe 6 times. Then I put it on the kitchen table. It sits there now next to 2 other things. My acceptance letter from St. Aldrich Preparatory Academy dated 1972. And a cream-colored table card that says, Nicholas Fisher Family Friend, which I have kept on purpose because a man should keep the receipt on a thing like that. I made 2 cups of coffee that morning. I poured one out. I expect I'll do that until I don't. Then I got my belt and my nail bags and went out to the truck because Trinity Lutheran needs a roof. Same church. Same slope my father came off in October of 1972 when I was 14 years old and about to start 9th grade at a school I never got to see the inside of. I gave them the friend price. The deacon tried to argue and I told him to save it. I never got to go to that school, but I paid for it 43 times, and this spring I finally got to say so out loud in a room with my name on it. That's the whole story. That's the only thing I ever wanted. So before you go, let me ask you one thing and pick one. Comment paper if you think I should have taken the $250,000 and stayed home that night. Comment name if you'd have walked to that microphone. There's no wrong answer here. I changed my own mind about 4 times on the drive down. And if this one landed somewhere real for you, there's another story waiting in the description, a mother, a will, and a room full of people who were very sure she couldn't read. Thank you for sitting with me.